Right for me, said. Atlanta's skyline burned neon in the glass as Nathan Caldwell lounged behind a black marble desk, wristwatch catching every shard of light. Amara Holt stood opposite, 13 and unshaken. I speak 9 languages, confidently. His laugh rang bright and hollow, designed to bruise. Beside the service cart, Elise Holt tightened her grip on a mop handle. Breath shallow, the faint scent of magnolia polish clinging to cool air from the vents. Between them lay a manuscript that had stalled museum curators and university consultants brittle. Pages laced with Coptic curves, Tamil loops, Greek angles, Yoruba notes in a cramped, careful hand. Show us a miracle, Caldwell said, sliding the document forward with a fingertip. Cameras nested in the ceiling watched like unsleeping eyes. A tray of still water trembled when the elevator cables hummed somewhere below. Amara didn't touch the pages. She tilted the top sheet until ink caught raking light, then glanced at Caldwell's signet ring-an engraved cowrie motif, identical to a tiny margin mark most readers would miss. You don't know what that means, she said quietly. The smile on his face thinned. It's decorative, he replied. It's an accounting symbol, she said, but not for money. She breathed across the parchment, not to reveal. Invisible ink, only to still a curl at the edge. Before I read, one condition. If I'm right, you follow what the text asks. Caldwell smirked. Texts don't make demands. This one does. She nodded toward a line where languages braided across a single sentence. Its author built a message you can't buy and your experts couldn't borrow. Elise shifted, leaving a dark crescent on the polished floor. The room felt smaller, as if the skyline pressed against the glass to listen. Amara lifted her voice, each syllable landing with calm precision, and began to read the first line aloud. What happened next will shock you. Atlanta's evening pressed against the glass crown of Caldwell Innovations while traffic murmured. Inside the penthouse office, wealth looked effortless. Black marble desk, brass frames, and rugs with lines neat as contracts. Nathan Caldwell paced before floor-to-ceiling windows, reflections of the skyline sliding over his suit. Elise Holt pushed it forward, sleeves damp, shoulders tight, eyes tracing spills before they existed. Her daughter, Amara, kept step, backpack close, gaze tugged toward a lamplit object on the desk. A manuscript, brittle pages, the color of terrested on a felt mat, its script braided in dense bands. She leaned just enough to see curves and angles known from library posters, Coptic hooks, Tamil loops, Greek slants. Watch that bucket, Nathan said, more habit than Roorman. The room smelled of lemon polish and cold air. Elise adjusted the handle and returned to the steel fixtures, wiping in precise circles. Donation from a client, Nathan said, eyeing the pages. Curators shrugged, professors argued, consultants invoiced. The thing still keeps its secrets. He touched a corner without pressure, then studied the girl, staring at it, curious. Yes, Amara answered. He angled the lamp so ink rose and fell in the glow. You, too, are here late. Extra floor, Elise said. No overtime without it. He nodded, as though totals added up inside his head. Your mother does reliable work, he told Amara. I hope she tells you the cost of big dreams. She says work pays them, Amara said. And you, what currency? Words, she said. Different kinds. Everyone has English, he replied. Rent wants more. Amara pictured the Auburn Avenue branch, warm wooden tables, the smell of paper and coffee, the hush that felt like respect. Ms. Lin held up cards and coaxed tone from breath. Mr. Patel chalked vowels when the whiteboard failed. A librarian joked that the shelves gossip if you listen. I study languages, she said. English and Spanish, French and Yoruba, Mandarin, some Tamil and Greek. A little sign, bits of Arabic, from neighbors who share pastries and homework. From where? From Saturdays, and people who teach when you ask the right way. He flicked a glance toward Elise, and you let her drift through libraries when she could bring home money. We earn with learning, Elise said. I work, she studies. Together we climb. Silence gathered, shaped by the sounds of vents and faint music outside. A helicopter slid past like a toy. Nathan leaned over the desk, eyes catching the city's glitter. So you can read that, he asked, chin lifting toward the manuscript, tone part amusement, part challenge. Some of it, Amara said, enough to try. He let out a polished laugh. Departments failed to crack 2 lines. I have invoices to prove it. Elise rolled the cart closer, bottle caps ticking. We didn't hire them, she said. We checked out books. Amara remembered early mornings when the elevator broke and Elise carried the mop up 3 flights. Nights when bills gathered like storm clouds on the fridge. The jar labeled courses where single dollars waited for bus fare to classes. She also remembered kindness, Ms. Lin's patient smile, Mr. Patel's clap when Tamil vowels finally rounded, a neighbor quoting a Yoruba proverb about names being roads. Nathan's phone buzzed. He ignored it. Let's settle a wager, he said. You read 2 lines. I add an hour to your mother's time. You trip, we close the book. Elise hated the way the word hour tugged at her. An hour could cover rice, a filter for the rattling window unit, and a rideshare when the bus skipped. She steadied her breath. She doesn't gamble, she said. She learns. Amara met his eyes. I'll read, she said. If I'm right, stop calling dreams expensive, like hope is a bill we forgot to pay. He shrugged. Translate, and we can haggle over poetry later. She moved to the desk. The lamp poured a clean pool of light across the inked lines. Shadows rested in the letter valleys. Cool air stroked sweat at her hairline. Through the glass, the city sent up engines and voices. The manuscript smelled faintly of cedar and dust. She didn't touch the page. She tracked a Coptic curve from a chart, found a Tamil ligature she had learned to draw without thinking, and noticed a Greek angle like a bent nail. The shapes weren't random, they braided. Elise stood a step behind, mop-steady eyes bright. With a mix of faith and fear, she had endured double shifts that left her wrists aching, a slammed door that sent her to urgent care, a landlord who raised rent when a new coffee shop arrived, and the look saved for cleaners as though steel and glass shone by magic. She had also endured joy, mornings when magnolia scented the air, afternoons when Amara translated for a neighbor picking up medicine, evenings when study erased the day's ache. Nathan shifted, cufflinks flashing. Well, Amara breathed, once, smoothing tremor. You measure people by how loudly you laugh at them, she said, translating a line she traced with her eyes. The text suggests another measure. Humility counts what stays standing after the laughter stops. His smile thinned. Convenient, he said. Any expert can hear what they want in noise. Then pick a part, she answered. I'll say what it says before you tell me what you think it means. He turned a page with careful fingers. Margins held smaller notes. Name those, he said, pointing. Greek, she replied, but late. She tapped the air above a letter. This angle gives it away. Who told you that? A librarian who loves puzzles. He laughed once. So instruction came free. Not free, Elise said. Just not billed. Amara pictured the branch when buses ran late. Newsprint sent volunteers with worksheets. Ms. Lin correcting. Tone without a frown. Mr. Patel cheering because her tongue finally shaped a sound that had refused to be caught. She tasted okra stew in memory and heard the proverb again about names being roads. Those roads led here. Outside, neon blinked. Inside, the vents hummed. Nathan tapped the desk, impatience rippling through his posture. Enough romance, he said. Prove capacity. Amara bent closer, careful not to shadow the lines. She chose a place where scripts intertwined like threads. Her mouth shaped syllables, testing them against memory. She didn't rush. She let the sentence find its rhythm. Elise's fingers pressed half moons into the mop handle. A printer in a nearby suite woke and clicked, then fell quiet. From the street, a trumpet climbed a bright phrase and vanished. The tower seemed to pause. Nathan slid a magnifier across. The desk, more performance than offer. If you need help seeing, he said. I don't, she answered. She held the line in her head, felt each piece lock into the next, and prepared to speak. Her voice would carry or fail. Either way, it would be heard. The room waited with her. The city leaned in. The ink held its breath. The stakes were not only an hour or a man's amusement, but the proof of a path carved through library aisles by a girl and the mother who pushed a cart beside her. She opened her mouth, ready to begin. Amara inhaled slowly and began to read, her voice low yet crisp, shaping each curve of ink like a careful stitch. She started with a Coptic clause she recognized from a chart tacked above the language shelf at the Auburn Avenue branch. Consonants, stacked like scaffolding, vowels lifting them into sense. The initial phrase unfolded, not flashy, simply precise, a quiet line about leaders who mistake noise for wisdom. Nathan's smirk held for a breath, then loosened, though he kept his posture broad, elbows resting on the black marble edge. Elise angled the cart away from the desk to avoid even a brush against the parchment, then stilled, eyes damp with pride. Amara pointed at a knot where Coptic met Tamil, a seam stitched centuries apart, and read again, this time catching a Tamil verb that Mr. Patel had drilled into memory with chalk dust floating under fluorescent lights. Her tongue found the retroflex, rolled once, settled, and the sentence clicked with a soft inevitability. You memorized tricks, Nathan said, voice silky with doubt, as if the room owed him agreement. Memory helps, she replied, but meaning holds the shape. She lifted the next line without touching the page, following the tiny notches along the margins, those odd marks that had looked decorative until she noticed a pattern. Ms. Lin would have turned into a game with index cards and a stopwatch. Elise's breath eased. Outside, the city carried horns, a fragment of laughter, and a stray trumpet phrase, rising like a dare. Nathan tapped a cufflink. Fine, he said, parlor reading. Name the script that squeezes this loop, and he pointed. at a tight knot of letters. Tamil, she answered, then added, from an older style than you probably saw in the consultant's slides. He exhaled through his nose, and that, Coptic, late, leaning toward Boharic features, she said, recalling a librarian's note beside a display case. She translated again, a gentle proverb about wealth that travels and wealth that anchors, shaped from crochetted idioms, then bridged the sections until the idea carried its balance. Nathan's smile shrank to a flat line. Where did you pick up those terms? YouTube glossaries. Wednesday evenings with Ms. Lin, Amara said. Saturday mornings with Mr. Patel. He drew the curve of that phoneme until I heard it instead of only seeing it. She pictured them now. Ms. Lin lining tone marks above Mandarin syllables while kids from 3 zip codes repeated after her. Mr. Patel setting out plastic cups filled with warm tea for shy students who showed up anyway. The branch had worn books with cracked spines, but every table gave out warmth from old varnish and steady lamps. Elise remembered a winter evening when the heater coughed and the staff brought out blankets from a box labeled emergency, and nobody left. Nathan cleared his throat. Immigrant tutors in a public building, he said, half statement, half skepticism. Volunteer teachers, Elise answered, pulse shaking her voice. They taught her because she asked. Amara kept reading. She eased through a cluster where Greek letters nested inside Tamil script like beads inside a braid. Then followed a side note that linked an African proverb she had heard on a neighborhood porch to a sketch along the margin. The message that emerged did not preach, yet it set down a rule. Intellect without humility bends toward harm. The translation turned that rule into a rhythm, a cadence that felt older than the ink. Nathan's eyes tracked her mouth, trying to catch a misstep. Slow down, he said, as if tempo exposed fraud. She slowed, not to appease him, but to respect the sentence breaks. Elise shifted her weight, absorbing the hum of vents, the buzz of elevator cables, the faint scent of lemon polish clinging to cold air. Who taught you Coptic? Nathan asked. An archivist who visits our branch on her day off, she said. She told me letters hold breath. You treat them like living things. So charity filled the gaps where school failed. Community filled gaps a budget can't reach, Elise said, meeting his gaze. Amara felt her mother's hand on her back without any touch at all. She read another sentence, carrying a Tamil metaphor about clay jars and what they hold when the water level drops. She bridged it into English cleanly, leaving no showmanship, only clarity. Nathan straightened. Consultants claimed the mixture is a hoax, he said, meaning planted later to mimic depth. Cheating by assumption is still cheating, she replied. I can show where each crossover repeats at measured intervals. Sun slid low across Atlanta, painting the glass like a slow fire while shadows climbed the office walls and stretched over marble, rugs, brass frames, even the waiting manuscript. Amara steadied her breathing, then let a new thread open. This time-catching Greek clarity, where a gloss had tucked itself beneath Tamil curves. She translated without flourish, voice even giving a sentence about humility bending pride before it breaks everything it touches. Then folded that sense into a Yoruba proverb about greetings, making a road between strangers. Nathan's posture faltered. He recovered with a small cough that pretended command. yet his fingers fidgeted at a cufflink as if a hidden grit bothered him. Elise edged closer, placing the cart against a seam in the floor, knuckles pale, breath lifting and settling. In quick measure. Outside, the sky dimmed into strands of peach and violet, long bars of light lying across the desk, so ink brightened, dulled, brightened again. Amara shifted a fraction and chose a brief Greek clause, then a Yoruba line she knew from a neighbor, who welcomed newcomers with Jollof stories and names said carefully. She spoke both, then smooth English that carried their weight without losing their cadence. The room caught each syllable as if afraid a single sound might escape and tell the city. Nathan tried for a laugh, but the tone came out thin. Cute, blend, he said. Borrowed sayings, dressed as scholarship. She didn't bite. She pointed to a margin mark, scratched like a small shell, then to a note in Greek that linked courage to listening, then to a Yoruba verb that tied respect to action. Her explanation was patient, measurable, and grounded by patterns rather than mood. Elise heard her heartbeat, a strong drum that refused to fade. The elevator hummed somewhere below and stilled. Behind the desk, a discreet door slid open. 2 colleagues entered, badges blinking green, their steps slow, faces pinched with curiosity. Nathan did not announce them. They joined the glass wall, feigning neutrality, eyes moving between girl, mother, manuscript, and boss. Amara kept going, aware of watchers yet unshaken, mind threading old lessons into this glowing hour. Greek offered a line about wisdom standing low to lift others high. Yoruba answered with a saying about a child's hands gathering with elders. To build a house that holds everyone during storms. She translated, then stitched both into a single thought that walked with quiet feet. Community makes wealth durable. Nathan inhaled as if about to cut in, then stumbled over his first word and stopped. A colleague cleared her throat, then looked at her shoes. Elise straightened, courage rising through tired ribs. She is not performing tricks, she said, voice trembling, yet steadying as truth found air. She learned because people opened up time they could have sold and shared it with a child who kept showing up. Amara felt those hours on her, tongue even now Miss Lin, tapping tone above Mandarin syllables until patience took root. Mr. Patel rolling retroflex consonants until the muscle understood what the mind wanted. Neighbors handing over proverbs with plates. The memory lent heat enough to hold steady when Nathan swept a hand, as if clearing crumbs. Fine, he said, sharper. Name that Greek. She recited the line without hurry, then pointed out a breathing mark and a vowel that fixed the era. The colleagues glanced at each other, a quick exchange that admitted surprise without admitting defeat. Nathan tried a different attack. Translate the Yoruba without context, he demanded. She did, adding the grammatical note for aspect because the verb held action over time rather than a flash. A colleague took another step in, then froze when Nathan shot him a look. Across the city, a train wailed. Sun bled down behind Midtown. Towers, drawing longer shadows that pooled under the desk and crept across Elise's shoes. Amara lifted a fresh segment where Greek guided an ethic while Yoruba grounded it in daily bread, and she gave both currents room. Words moved like water around stone, not quite soft, not quite hard, carrying grit downstream. Nathan edged forward. Enough parables, he said. What does it say right there, letter by letter? She invited him closer with a nod. "Why don't you start?" she said, still gentle. "Take that Greek phrase and read it aloud." His mouth opened, then paused, hunting for footing on a terrain he had not walked. He tried a sound, mangled it, then masked the stumble with a cough. The colleagues blinked with synchronized discomfort. Elise set the spray bottle down, hands free now, chin lifting, despite a flicker in her throat. "Let her finish," she said, her tone held steel. Nathan's jaw flexed. Amara returned to the line, pronouncing each letter as if guiding a careful hand down a steep stair. She broke the phrase into manageable pieces, then rebuilt it into sense, demonstrating control without cruelty. Silence in the office changed shape, no longer heavy with disdain, now taut with attention. Outside, the last light thinned to copper, and downtown windows glittered like sequins scattered on dark fabric. She continued, switching to Yoruba again, offering a translation about greetings before eating, care before coin, then naming the tense accurately, then rendering an elegant English equivalent. Nathan swallowed. Confidence cracked, not collapsed, a hairline running under polish. He aimed another proxy. "Fine," he said, forcing calm. "We rely on experts for reason. You offer narratives." Amara did not smile. She lifted the magnifier he had toyed with earlier and placed it by the margin so anyone could track the tiny count etched like a code. "Map it," she said. "It repeats every fourth unit, which anchors crossovers and keeps metaphors aligned." One colleague stepped near to see, then flinched back, as if proximity itself carried risk. Nathan watched him, then returned his gaze to Amara, only to find none of her nerve had leaked away. Elise reached into the cart, withdrew a cloth, then folded it once, twice, finding something to do while holding her ground. Her eyes glistened, not with fear now, but more like the weather after rain. Amara turned a page by lifting only the corner of the mat and letting gravity help rather than fingers, then found a Greek summary that crowned the section. She translated with even tone, giving each syllable room, then tied the conclusion to a Yoruba maxim about names carrying destiny when spoken with care. All of it joined into a coherent arc. Humility roots power so it can bear fruit. Community waters that tree so it feeds beyond its fence. Nathan tried once more to interrupt, yet words got tangled. A colleague murmured, "Maybe, let her," then stopped as silence pressed him flat. Elise stepped beside her daughter, a quiet alignment that said more than a speech. Nathan lifted his chin. "Enough spectacle," he said. "We are not a classroom." Amara looked at the nameplate etched with his title and rested her hands lightly on the desk's edge, careful to avoid the pages. "Then read," she said. "Choose any Greek line and give it voice." He hesitated, throat-working. Sun had dropped behind glass towers, leaving only a dusky rim. Yet the office lights had not brightened. Shadows stayed long, making every hesitation feel larger. At last, he leaned in, squinted, and attempted the first word, producing a sound that rang, wrong even to his ears. Silence held. Amara's expression remained kind, as though a coach waiting for a trainee to breathe. He tried the next letter, then gave up and looked away. The pause lengthened into a verdict. The colleagues looked toward the door, then back at him. Outside, traffic murmured, a low river moving past brick, steel, and shops where name tags gleamed above, patient smiles. Inside, Attention shifted, not by decree, but by gravity. Nathan's authority still filled the room, yet it no longer defined every inch. The manuscript stole a portion, Amara claimed another, Elise took a slice no one could return. Amara resumed, layering Greek and Yoruba until meaning stood upright without props, then delivered an English rendering that landed like a steady heartbeat. It is named a leader as one who kneels before speaking, one who invests in language so neighbors can understand the budget, one who counts value by how many eat. A colleague exhaled, a small, honest sound. Nathan heard it and flinched, so he summoned sarcasm like armor. Touching, he said. Shall we pass a basket next? Elise didn't retreat. We pass baskets every day, she said. Some hold dollars, some hold chances. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied as a deeper strength answered. Fear. Amara read one last pair of lines, then lowered her chin slightly. If you still doubt, she said, choose any sentence and I will parse it with you, or hand the page to your team. The colleagues avoided her eye, regret mixing with calculation. Nathan's mouth pressed thin. He folded his arms, then unfolded them, fingers tapping in a rhythmic beat that betrayed tension. The arc of power had not flipped, still it had tilted, and everyone felt it. Even the city seemed to hold its breath as lights blinked on street by street, a constellation forming below. Amara stepped back half a pace, calm, intact, waiting for the next move. Knowing she had placed the burden of proof on the only person in the room who could no longer pretend he carried certainty alone. Humiliation flickered across Nathan Caldwell's face, quick as glare sliding over glass, then stiffened into anger that tried to fill the room. Enough, he said, stabbing a finger at the manuscript as if ink could be bullied. Gaming the moment. Someone fed you lines. He waved toward the ceiling cameras. Let's get an actual expert. Amara Holt didn't move. Breath steady, shoulders square. She stood near the desk while Elise Holt, palms open, braced quietly beside the cart. Security arrived with a woman in a gray blazer carrying a canvas tube and a calm that didn't ask permission. Her badge read, Dr. Maria Arellano, Linguistics. Nathan recovered a brittle smile. Independent verification, he announced. Read, test, expose. Dr. Arellano set a small lamp, unrolled a magnifier, and listened as Amara revoiced the Greek clause. Then a Yoruba proverb, then the braided sentence tying humility to community. Questions came clean, and technical vowel quality drift across centuries. The kinds of margin signals scribes favor when they're building structure under the words, and Amara answered with specifics learned under warm library lights. Ms. Lynn's tone drills, Mr. Patel's chalky diagrams, an archivist's note about breathing marks that carry meaning. Cedar polish lifted from the desk, cool air from the vents added a metallic edge, and Atlanta's humid night pressed faint sirens against the glass. After a careful page turn, the linguist looked up. Her renderings are sound, she said. Not flashy correct. The cross-script design is intentional, the verdict thudded. Nathan's jaw snapped tight. People can be coached, he muttered. Pattern tricks impress crowds. Coaching doesn't fabricate cross-system intuition, Dr. Arellano replied. Whoever taught her taught well. Elise's breath shook, then steadied. In the hall, A colleague paused with a phone, thumbs busy. Another adjusted an earbud, harvesting gossip. Rumors moved like heat through concrete. Posts surfaced within minutes. A blurred still of a girl beside a mop cart and a priceless artifact. Captions with sharp certainty and little knowledge. Prodigy, one scoffed. Staged, another sneered. Nice trick for a cleaner's. Kid who wrote the script. Alerts rolled across devices. Elise ignored the buzzing rectangle in her pocket and watched her daughter's face instead. Nathan signaled toward the doors. Escort them downstairs while I handle optics. He told security, ownership dripping from every syllable. Fluorescence flattened the color in the corridor. At the elevator, a guard eyed Amara's backpack. Deliveries use the other entrance, he said, tone neutral on the surface, rasp beneath. She's not delivering anything, Elise answered. She's leaving after doing your boss's work. The guard lifted both hands. Whatever helps. Numbers ticked down. The doors parted. A wall of heavier air hit, loaded with fryer smoke from carts outside and summer's wet breath. The lobby screens ran muted headlines. A crawl had already seeded the story. Local CEO entertains translation challenge. Mystery teen involved. Phones hovered near the revolving doors like insects around a porch bulb. Say something, genius. Someone called. Who's paying you? Another asked, recording without blinking. Elise stepped forward, shield without spectacle. Amara touched her mother's forearm and guided both of them through the noise, pace unhurried, spines straight. Down the block, the public library glowed like a patient lighthouse, and they angled toward it as if drawn by tide. Cool air met them inside, smelling of cedar shelves, paper, glue, and the quiet promise of focus. Ms. Lin looked up from a table, where students traced tone marks, read the entire situation in a single glance, and rose. Mr. Patel appeared from the stacks with 2 mugs, setting one at Elise's elbow before any explanation. Breathe, Ms. Lin said softly. You stood above a storm, Mr. Patel added, voice low, steady as a drumbeat. Amara sank into a familiar chair whose varnish had outlived dozens of school years. Elise wrapped her hands around the mug as if warmth could soak into bone. A volunteer nudged a window shut against the damp chorus outside. On the community board, a poster still hung hand-lettered and ringed with color. When have you faced doubt but kept going? Comment to uplift others with your resilience. Amara let that line anchor her. She recounted the linguist's conclusion. Relief loosened Elise's jaw, then tightened again when she finally checked her phone. Messages, layered, praise, warnings, suspicion. Careful, one read. They'll use her for clicks and drop her when the next wave hits. Ms. Lin tapped the corner of the poster and met Amara's eyes. The page you read asked for dignity, she said. Hold that line. Platforms flutter, principles stay. Mr. Patel nodded. Truth doesn't need the loudest mic. It needs patience. Amara pulled a notebook and sketched the hidden grid she'd described upstairs, matching counts to crossovers so anyone could follow the braid. Elise watched the pencil move and felt gratitude so fierce it ached. Words gathered behind her teeth, the ones she rarely said aloud. She began haltingly, then let them out. Months when the heater died and the oven kept a tiny apartment warm. A partner who vanished when hospital invoices arrived. rent rising like a tide while bus routes shrank. Thin walls and thick rules, professionals glancing at a uniform before a face. The jar labeled courses that swallowed singles and coins, and the Saturdays she refused overtime because free lessons paid a different debt. I am not ashamed, she finished, voice rough, spine straight. I am tired, not ashamed. Eyes shone around the table. Amara listened like a witness and remembered the magnolia scent after evening classes, sidewalks slick with heat, a city hush that felt like respect. She remembered translating for a neighbor at a clinic, Yoruba kindness woven carefully into English forms until fear eased. She remembered Dr. Arellano's measured words and chose to anchor herself to confirmation rather than G. Upstairs, Caldwell Innovations buzzed. Nathan paced in front of the glass, colleagues whispering updates. We smothered this, he started, then heard himself and flinched. We address it with clarity, he corrected, fingers already drafting. A statement that credited consultants, minimized the girl, and reframed events as a neat internal exercise. Before he could send, a message from Dr. Arellano arrived. Translations confirmed. The student's method deserved respect. The manuscript offered guidance about inclusive leadership worth any institution's study. Another note from legal advised restraint until rights questions are settled. Pride tightened his jaw. The city leaned into night, heat clinging to brick, rail ties, and empty lots. Closing time neared. Overhead lights dimmed a notch. A staffer asked gently if anyone needed a last printout. Ms. Lin scribbled a number on a sticky note for Elise, an offer to help filter requests. Mr. Patel wrapped 2 tea bags in a napkin for later. Amara jotted the Greek summary from memory and set a Yoruba maxim beneath, then added plain English with the care she would give a friend's name. Elise slipped the note, napkin, and notebook into the backpack. A teen by the computers lifted a thumb without looking up. Quiet solidarity, moving faster than headlines. They stepped outside. Humidity closed in. Cicadas rasped. A bus wheezed at the curb. They walked toward the stop, shoulders nearly touching, saying nothing for a block. A car slowed. A shout tried to sting. Tires squealed. Echoes thinned. Elise flinched once, then kept moving. Amara raised her chin. Cedar clung to her sleeves. Tea lingered on her breath. Those small human smells felt like armor the night could not breach. Behind them, window light threw warm rectangles across the sidewalk, like stepping stones. Each glow suggested a next step study tomorrow. Call Ms. Lin, text Mr. Patel. Carry the manuscript's call for dignity into every room that pretended not to hear. They reached the bench and sat while warm air lapped at their ankles and headlights drifted past like a slow river. No triumph, no defeat, only resolve heavy as the heat, steady as breath, waiting for morning. Morning slid across Atlanta like a clean ribbon, warming pains and lifting a faint haze from streets washed by night crews. When the elevator eased open on the top floor of Caldwell Innovations, Amara Holt stepped out beside her mother with resolve, steady as brick. Nathan Caldwell stood by the window, jacket draped on a chair, tie loosened. Hands unsteady near the black marble edge, eyes rimmed as if sleep had argued and lost. The manuscript waited in its felt cradle, brittle pages cushioned by foam lamp angled to spare the ink. Elise Holt paused, drew a hush through her ribs, then nodded. Nathan gestured toward the desk without his usual flourish. "Finish what you started," he said, voice thinner than last night. Amara slipped her backpack onto the chair arm, rolled her shoulders, and took position at the lamp. She did not touch the parchment. She traced lines in the air, eyes moving along Coptic curves, Tamil loops, Greek angles, then the Yoruba glosses that braided them into living sense. She read a quiet clause about leaders kneeling before speaking, then a proverb that joined bread to belonging. Each breath steadied the room. Even the vents sounded kinder. Margins carried tiny marks she had mapped last night at the library, a grid repeating every fourth beat. She named the pattern, then delivered a sentence that braided humility with stewardship. Her cadence stayed simple, the way Ms. Lynn preferred when lessons mattered more than style. Mr. Patel's chalk strokes lived in her tongue as retroflex consonants landed cleanly. She moved through a summary in Greek, then lifted a Yoruba line that tied generosity to honor. The meaning gathered like rainfall into a basin, wealth measured by how many rise, not how much glitters on a single wrist. Nathan reached for the magnifier and missed it by a finger's width. He tried again, slower, then lowered his hand. A tremor visited his knuckles. Sunlight skimmed the watch on his wrist and broke into soft shards across the marble. He cleared his throat as if to interrupt and instead swallowed air. "Continue," he said, barely louder than the hum behind the panels. Amara finished the penultimate passage where the scribe warned that glass reflects faces, never hearts. She rendered that caution plainly, then paused, letting silence carry weight. Atlanta's skyline seemed to lean closer, waiting for the last key. She turned the final page with a tiny lift of the felt edge, letting gravity help. Brittle fibers whispered like old leaves. The closing section gathered the earlier threads and tied them in one knot. Steward power so neighbors eat, learn, rest, and speak. Keep doors open. Count success by dignity restored. Amara read every syllable, then offered an English rendering that kept the skeleton intact. "True wealth," she said, "lives in the number of hands you strengthen." The words settled. Even the building's bones seemed to exhale. Elise pressed a palm against her apron and blinked hard. Nathan stood very still, then reached for the chair as though gravity had shifted beneath his shoes. He faced Elise, not the glass. "Ms. Holt," he began, then corrected himself with care. "Elise Holt, I owe you an apology. I treated you like air you were paid to move through. I spoke over your daughter as if brilliance required a pedigree I recognized. That was ignorance dressed as certainty." He let his eyes return to Amara. "I bought a puzzle and called it mine. You brought meaning and asked for nothing but respect. I hear you now." He unclasped his watch and set it face down, an odd gesture that shrank the gleam which had punctuated his sentences for years. "I used laughter like a gate," he said. "I believed height equals truth because rooms like this taught me to trust echoes." His hands shook again, and he did not hide it. "I have been wrong about value, language, work, and community. I was especially wrong about a mother balancing two worlds so a child could cross them both." Elise let out a breath that sounded like fatigue leaving the body after a long climb. Amara kept her tone even. "If understanding is real," she said, then let it move beyond a speech. Fund the programs that taught me. Every branch needs books, teachers, space, and time. Create scholarships that follow students, not headlines. Choose recipients from neighborhoods nobody courts until campaign season, and you must learn a language yourself. Start at the library, like everyone else. Sit at those wooden tables and practice tone or tense without a personal assistant hovering. She held his gaze. Commit in writing now, not after a committee edits the feeling out of it. Nathan nodded, without bargaining. He picked up a pen, wrote a short pledge across company stationery, and signed with a hand that steadied only after the last line. He called legal and finance, directed a seed fund large enough to launch classes citywide, and named the library as the primary partner. Ms. Lin and Mr. Patel deserve contracts, he added. Pay them for the labor we have treated as charity. He looked at Amara. I will start with Swahili. If you agree to lead a beginner session, I will sit in the front row and stumble like any student. Elise covered her mouth, shoulders shaking, not from fear now, but from relief, finding a pathway through tired muscles. Amara nodded, then added guardrails. Create independent oversight, she said. Let community members review budgets and publish every grant list with plain language accounts. Put my mother's peers on a council that recommends workplace changes, name use, shift schedules, safety, promotion tracks. Tie your bonus to those outcomes. If these promises fade, the city will know. Nathan absorbed each condition, then agreed, not with a nod alone, but with a directive to his team, typed and sent. The room changed temperature, or perhaps the three people inside it finally noticed the light. Clouds parted over downtown, and the skyline loosened its shoulders like a runner after a hard mile. Dust motes turned gentle in the lamp beam. The manuscript looked less like a trophy and more like a neighbor with wisdom to share. Nathan bowed his head, not theatrical, simply human. Thank you, Amara Holt, he said. Thank you, Elise Holt. He asked Amara to return the last page to rest. She lifted the felt edge, lowered the leaf, and smoothed the air above it. He cleared his throat. What is the proper word for apology? I should learn first. She offered one in Swahili and another in Yoruba, then translated the deeper sense. Apology means taking weight off someone else by carrying it with your own hands. He repeated both slowly, syllable by syllable, carefully, as if the future depended on pronunciation. Elise squeezed her daughter's shoulder. Security waited at the door, uncertain, no longer hostile. Papers lay signed. Emails moved. Yet the real measure would arrive later, when budgets met neighborhoods. Nathan walked them to the elevator and stood silent until the doors slid shut. He faced the glass again, watched sunlight break on distant rooftops, and repeated the words, like vows. The building felt lighter, as if the city itself had exhaled. Still, promises live or die in the days that follow. Would he hold course when shareholders frowned, when peers laughed, when habit tugged? The question hovered beside the skyline, patient as morning, waiting for proof. The announcement went out on a Monday morning with no fanfare, just a clear memo, a posted pledge, and a transfer that landed in the library system's account before lunch. Caldwell Innovations would fund language classes in every branch across the city, seed scholarships for marginalized youth, and publish quarterly reports written in plain English. The note at the bottom carried a sentence, Amara had translated days earlier. Measure wealth by how many hands you strengthen. Staff screens blinked, coffee steamed, and surprise traveled faster than rumor. Nathan walked the hall without an entourage, checking his steps, greeting receptionists by name, pausing before he spoke. Some peers texted him claws wrapped in jokes. Woke crusader, soft CEO, say hi to your new fan club. He let the messages stack unread. In a conference room, he faced a half-circle of senior leaders who saw risk where he saw a ledger finally balancing with reality. Data will decide, one insisted, jaw tight. It will, Nathan replied, and we will publish it ourselves. A younger manager asked about optics. He answered with budgets, milestones, and governance, then added something he would not have said a week ago. The work serves people first. By afternoon, the Auburn Avenue branch felt like a festival. Warm light pooled across wooden tables, and a line of chairs faced a whiteboard where Amara had written simple Swahili greetings in block letters. Nathan took the front seat with a spiral notebook and a cheap pencil he refused to upgrade. Elise stood near the door, wearing a new badge that read Community Liaison, eyes bright, shoulders taller than yesterday. Ms. Len adjusted the tabletop lamp to avoid glare that could fatigue anyone's eyes. Mr. Patel set out tea and a plate of crackers, smiling at a crowd that included custodians, interns, engineers, a bus operator, still in uniform, a grandmother with a cane, and two middle schoolers who whispered but stayed put. Amara began with Hujambo, then paired it with Sijambo, explained the call and response, and then coaxed the group through vowel shapes that land clean and musical. Nathan stumbled on the second round, laughed at himself, then focused. Until the sounds fit, she moved to Gina Langu, asked for names, repeated each one with care, and made room for shyness. She taught a proverb about greeting being a doorway to understanding, and eyes around the tables softened as meaning clicked. Elise watched ordinary beauty unfold and felt her chest widen. Across town, mockery traveled easier than nuance. A podcast clipped a photo from the launch and sneered about corporate theatrics. An investor posted a chart, circled a dip, and suggested leadership had replaced focus with feelings. In Slack channels and break rooms, the mood split. Some rolled their eyes and predicted a pivot by quarter's end. Many more leaned in, offering to mentor, redesign pages, build dashboards, staff classes, and print schedules in multiple languages. A warehouse team volunteered to host evening lessons near the loading docks so night crews could join without missing buses. A developer added a tool that read scholarship forms aloud, one field at a time, so applicants could check entries before submitting. Elise's promotion came with responsibilities she could name without reading a script. She met with department heads to align shifts, translate timetables into formats that made sense for crews riding to buses, fix a badge system that mangled names, and design a hotline that connected workers to a real person. She set up listening sessions in a break room that smelled like coffee and cardboard, passed out index cards for anonymous notes, then returned a week later with answers printed in plain font. Changes followed: a pilot that paid for transit cards, a calendar that blocked time for classes, and a policy that ensured overnight staff had equal access to bonuses usually tied to meetings held at noon. Nathan faced friends who wanted him back in familiar lanes over cocktails. Someone asked if he felt finished proving his point. He answered without heat, "The point is not mine." He returned to the branch the next evening and sat in the same chair. Amara advanced to simple verbs, kuya, quinda. Kula paired them with courtesy, then asked the room to practice short dialogues. Ms. Lin clapped when a shy intern found a rhythm. Mr. Patel playfully corrected a retroflex, then winked at the bus operator, who nailed it on the next try. Between drills, Amara checked the scholarship portal. Applications were already arriving from zip codes that rarely showed up on old recruiting maps. Essays spoke of grandparents who kept gardens, cousins who translated at clinics, and neighbors who taught math on stoops when schools closed early. On Wednesday, a partner called Nathan to warn that the market disliked distractions. He replied with numbers that linked retention to dignity and pointed to teams where reforms had already lowered turnover. Atlanta woke with magnolias opening like white lanterns along boulevards, and the library breathed to life with a soft hum that sounded like hope. Nathan arrived early for Amara's Swahili class, notebook already smudged from last week's drills, pencil shaved to a stubborn point. He retook the front chair, shoulders squared, posture humble, mouth ready to trip and try. Amara greeted him with a nod that carried both encouragement and accountability, then wrote short sentences on the board, each linked to a simple scene: a greeting at a bus stop, an introduction in a crowded hallway, a thanks offered after help. Participants repeated, stumbled, breathed, and tried again. Nathan fumbled the glide in kuya, corrected it, missed the second syllable, corrected that too, and finally landed a clean rhythm. Applause rose, not loud, just warm, the kind that says effort counts. Elise hovered near the doorway with her new badge, answering questions about schedules, sliding scholarship flyers into waiting hands, pointing newcomers toward seats, smiling with a steadiness that grounded the room. By noon, the portal's counter ticked upward, showing more applicants. From neighborhoods once treated like footnotes. A Latina poet from Summerhill submitted pages alive with images of trains, gardens, and second languages dancing in a single mouth. A refugee coder from Clarkston sent a portfolio built after midnight shifts, logic stitched with patience, comments written in neat English learned at a library table. Recommendations followed from teachers, mentors, neighbors, pastors, and nurses, each letter carrying the gravity of someone who had watched potential grow under limited light. Review teams met in rooms that smelled like paper and coffee, sorted essays with rubrics designed to protect fairness, and set aside time to call families who needed help finishing forms. Elise led the calls with a voice that treated every question like it mattered, because it did. At Caldwell Innovations, she launched the Name Right initiative with 3 clear steps: pronounce every employee's name correctly, print phonetic guides on badges when requested, and fix software that truncated identities into fragments. She hosted short sessions in break rooms and conference spaces where workers practiced saying colleagues' names, asked for corrections, and learned how respect begins with precision. Metrics changed, complaint logs dropped, new hire surveys recorded higher trust. People lingered after meetings to swap stories about grandparents, nicknames, and languages that had crossed oceans in suitcases. A veteran machinist said he had never seen a VP stop a presentation to fix a mispronunciation before Elise made it normal. Rumors about tokenism evaporated when production numbers improved and turnover eased in units that adopted the practices fully. Resistance did not vanish. A partner rolled their eyes during a quarterly review and asked when the company would resume operations. Nathan kept his voice level and showed contracts signed by clients who liked working with teams that treated communities like stakeholders. The board pressed him about costs. He brought data that linked respect to retention, training savings, fewer errors, and stronger supplier ties. He still felt heat, yet he stayed the course, repeating to himself a line he had copied from the manuscript: "Count success by dignity restored. Spring ripened. Magnolia blooms loosened waxy petals that perfumed sidewalks. Atlanta wore green around the brick like a welcome scarf." The library buzzed with finals, parents, toddlers, and elders, exploring new classes. Preparations began for a public event that would gather donors, students, teachers, and families to celebrate a first round of scholarships and the expansion of language programs. During the week leading up to the event, skeptics kept posting. One thread accused the program of picking favorites. Another laughed at the thought of a CEO taking notes in a beginner workshop. Replies piled, then thinned, when recipients described hours spent studying between gigs, and tutors described buses missed because someone needed help with a verb. Saturday arrived, bright and sunny. Volunteers strung paper banners across the lawn, taped hand-lettered arrows near doors, and stacked folding chairs in neat rows under oak shade that drifted with a mild breeze. Tables held stacks of bilingual flyers, sign-up sheets, and pitchers of iced tea that sweated in the warmth. Atlanta leaned into a warm dusk that turned windows honey gold, while streetcars hummed and magnolias breathed sweetness along the sidewalks. Inside the Auburn Avenue branch, a new banner unfurled above the circulation desk: the Amara Foundation. For education, the launch felt simple on purpose. Funding arrived from Nathan Caldwell, but leadership belonged to Elise Holt, Ms. Lynn, Mr. Patel, Dr. Maria Arellano, and a circle of neighborhood mentors who had earned trust by showing up with patience when cameras were gone. Articles posted numbers, volunteers printed schedules. A retired carpenter built rolling shelves, a baker donated cornbread and fruit, and a bus driver mapped late routes so students working nights could still reach class. Elise set the charter. With plain language, scholarships that follow the learner, free citywide instruction, clear reports, and decision power resting with the communities served. Nathan signed the endowment papers and stepped back, choosing a seat among students at the first board meeting, speaking only when asked. Libraries across Atlanta answered like bright windows blinking on at once. Branches in Cascade, Kirkwood, West End, Grant Park, and Clarkston added evening language sessions, financial literacy circles, study tables, repair clinics, and mentorship hours that paired engineers with teenagers and nurses with new parents. A pilot brought mobile carts to parks near apartments where transit ran thin, and a muraled van hauled laptops, storybooks, and hot cocoa to corners that had been overlooked for years. Registrations surged, flyers in Spanish, Yoruba, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Arabic hung beside English notices. and every page included phonetic guides so names would be honored at Sinin. Amara turned 14 in spring, added a second strap to her backpack because the weight of notebooks tugged at one shoulder, and kept teaching with calm focus that made crowds relax. Her Swahili workshop became a rotating series introducing greetings, everyday verbs, cultural context, and courtesies that make strangers neighbors. She never performed, she prepared. She scribbled lesson plans at a table near the big clock, recycled index cards after each class, and walked home with sore feet and a content heart. Elise managed oversight with steady hands, chairing monthly reviews where recipients shared progress, asked for adjustments, and suggested mentors who understood their obstacles. She expanded her Name Right initiative beyond company walls into city services and partner firms, guiding teams as they replaced clumsy forms with respectful fields and trained supervisors to ask, listen, and correct without defensiveness. Numbers moved in the right direction because people felt seen. Meanwhile, Nathan kept practicing like any beginner. He arrived early, sat near the board, stumbled through Kuya and Kwenda, opened his notebook whenever classmates spoke, and wrote a sentence each night to seal the day's lesson. On the first page of a small journal, he copied a line he had learned: "To live by dignity is daily practice." Whenever habit tried to drag him toward shortcuts, he read the words and breathed until patience returned. Scholarships blossomed into life-changing rather than headlines that fade. Recipients reflected the city's breadth: a Latina poet from Summerhill printing a bilingual chapbook for schools, a refugee coder from Clarkston building a rideshare matcher for night shifts, a deaf ceramicist leading a packed workshop, and a grandmother who passed citizenship and now tutors elders using flashcards with garden sketches. The foundation insisted on transparency, so budgets were posted online. Contracts named actual instructors, and meeting minutes included action items with dates. Some skeptics remained, claiming the effort would slow under its goodwill or drown in metrics, yet each month another branch reported crowded rooms and fewer dropouts, and the criticism sounded like old air moving through closed vents. One evening, the main hall filled for a ceremony honoring the first full cohort of scholarship recipients. Sun poured amber light through tall windows, while ceiling fans stirred a gentle breeze that smelled like paper, polish, and magnolia drifting. From the courtyard, tables wore simple cloths, chairs stood in clean rows, and microphones sounded warm and clear. Ms. Lin arranged sign-in sheets by branch. Mr. Patel set tea beside lemon water, and Dr. Arellano stacked envelopes and smoothed edges with absent care. Nathan carried boxes, taped cords to floors, checked batteries, and kept his watch face down in his pocket, a habit that made time feel generous rather than sharp. Families arrived in lines curling past the stacks, children whispering, cousins laughing, neighbors clasping hands and swapping recipes while they found seats. Amara stepped behind the lectern and looked across faces lit by evening light, then began calling names with exact pronunciation, learned from forms and quick notes she had taken during short meetings earlier in the week. She paused to confirm a syllable when doubt tickled, asked for corrections with humility, repeated the final version until a smile confirmed it, and announced awards with a joy that landed like music. She honored a poet, a coder, a ceramicist, the cousins with the laptop lab, the grandmother who now tutored neighbors, a home health aide studying anatomy at night, a line cook building an urban farming certificate, and a high school drummer planning to engineer soundboards. Applause rose in warm waves that rattled window panes and settled into grateful murmurs. Between names, Elise thanked custodians, bus operators, and volunteers who hauled folding tables through rain, then introduced a council of student advisors who would share power over programming and outreach. The microphone was passed to Nathan briefly. He spoke like a student delivering homework, short and sincere, crediting teachers and promising to protect budgets through the next negotiation cycle. He ended by quoting the manuscript's closing message: "Count success by how many rise, number, flourish, only a steady voice carrying a changed mind." As the ceremony closed, the hall shifted into a celebration that felt like a block party among shelves. Voices braided languages into a soft roar. Children danced between chairs, and line cooks rolled in trays from a nearby kitchen whose owner had grown up 3 blocks away. A jazz trio set up near the biographies and found a groove that made elders sway, and the PA carried a playlist chosen by students from across branches. Amara moved through the crowd with her heavier backpack, showing a child how to hold a pencil around a new phrase, accepting thanks with a nod and deflecting praise. Toward the teams that kept rooms open late, Elise flowed from family to family, collecting ideas and phone numbers, then stood under a window where dusk deepened into blue and let herself cry for 10 seconds before returning to the work table. Nathan stacked folding chairs beside a teenager who teased him about a vowel he still hadn't mastered, and he laughed because he knew trying out loud mattered more than image. When the last envelope found a pocket and the last tray slid back onto a cart, the staff gathered on the steps facing the courtyard. Air hung warm and sweet as magnolia, cicadas strummed, buses sighed at the corner, and the city glowed like a book left open. Elise placed a hand on Amara's shoulder and whispered that tomorrow would bring more requests, more forms, more hours, and that they would handle each one with the care they had asked of others. Amara nodded, leaning into that promise, the way a runner leans through a finish while seeing the next starting line a few paces ahead. Before they left, Nathan pulled his journal and wrote the sentence again, not for effect, for memory, dignity, is daily practice. He tucked the notebook away, turned back toward the branch, and clapped like any student who had learned from the night, no title attached. Across the courtyard, the banner moved slightly in the breeze, ink catching light like a quiet star, and for a moment, the building felt like a lighthouse showing ordinary boats the safe way home. The night did not erase the need, it held it, gently, while people carried each other. That balance, not applause, defined victory. When the doors finally closed, a ripple of voices hummed behind the glass, the kind of sound that lingers after joy and reminds anyone passing by that welcoming spaces change cities in measurable ways. Before the video team packed a camera, Amara returned to the lectern. She recorded one last message for every screen that would play the story later, looking straight into the lens with the same steady warmth she used in class and closing with a clear invitation that left no fence to sit on for everyone. Inspired by Amara's courage, Join a library program, share your story in the comments, and subscribe to see how others transform lives.